Good evening, darlings and deviants. My name is Lucy, and I'm just a little loony. Being as how I'm a newer Lorcana content creator, I decided to look into some of the themes people have made content about, and started seeing if I could add anything to the general conversation that everybody's having. Can't really do card reviews. I personally don't like reviewing cards until a whole set is out for the full context. I can't really do gameplay. I live in a circus and it's a little hard to find the time and proper places to record here. It's really hard to record footage from a high wire, really. Can't do news. I joined right at the point when a big news drop had already happened and had been covered by everyone and their grandma. There's tier lists already. There's just so much great content. Geez, why is everybody gotta be super cool and have great stuff? Well, looking to find my niche, I decided to take a look and see what I could offer to the table. Besides my charming good looks, a wonderful personality, and being one of the 4 total Emerald Ink enjoyers, I figured at least for today I could talk about theories surrounding deck construction. After today, I'll figure something out. So for today, let's speak about your ink curve, what it is, why it's important, and why it may be a difficult thing to balance in Lorcana moving into the future. Without further ado, let's start the show! So, what do I mean by a curve? Well, in card games with resources that aren't just cards, mana, lands, so on and so forth, you typically want to find a balance between early game, mid game, and your late game. This ends up making the average deck look, well, like a curve. Some decks are skewed towards either end of the spectrum, but on average, you're focused on the middle of the curve. So why does any of this matter in Lorcana? Well, for 2 reasons. One, if you're doing nothing in the early turns of the game, a faster deck could very easily outpace you in lore gain. To counter that, if you go too far into the early game, you'll end up drawing less impactful cards once everyone has a solid mid-range or late game options. For 2, analyzing your curve can help you make some decisions on both deck building and inking priorities. For example, say you have an average ink cost of 3 or 4 in your deck. Your breakpoints end up being around the 6 to 8 ink range before you can be playing 2 cards a turn in order to hop ahead of your opponent's board state. And that's the name of the game, being able to do more things than your opponent in order to outpace them on lore gain. Or being able to play and make actions every turn in order to take advantage of your opponent missing plays, for example not having a 2-drop on turn 2, etc, etc. But Lucy, you mentioned deck building requirements. Well, yes I did, dearest viewer, because in addition to wanting to outpace your opponent in board state, you also want to make sure you're keeping up in terms of card draw in relation to how much ink your deck needs. To explain a bit further, say you're an aggressive deck with an average curve of 1 to 3. We don't really have any of these at the moment, but we're future-proofing this video. Hi, Lucy from the future here. So technically, I was wrong here. The Stitch deck, the Stitch Rockstar deck specifically, it technically qualifies as an aggro deck. You can play lower cost stuff at around the 1, 2, and 3 range, and then later on in the game, you shift onto Stitch, and that gives you a source of card draw in the later parts of the game. Technically, I'm right about the fact that you do need more card draw in an aggressive deck, because you need more stuff to do, but you see what I mean here. Technically, we don't have a true aggressive deck in the sense of, like, you just have a bunch of 1-drops and 2-drops, and then you try to get there as fast as possible. That may be a thing that's different with Lorcana, but we don't really know yet. Again, we don't have all the cards. It's kind of hard to put all of this together just yet. Okay, anyway, take it back, past me. A deck like that will inherently need less card draw, as each card in your deck will ideally be getting you closer and closer to victory. However, if you need to be consistently hitting a solid 4 or 5-drop, you'll want to include some solid options for recurring card draw. Talking about Shift for a moment. Shift cards might be normally shown as their original costs in deck building apps and, well, on the card itself. However, when you're building your deck, I suggest you use the shift cost when tracking your curve. But what if I don't shift it? You'll be fine. If you're including a shift package in your deck, you're planning on shifting. You're not anticipating needing to pay the full cost of it. Sometimes you might need to, but factoring it into deck building is frankly silly. You can't prepare a deck for any eventuality ever, and you shouldn't build around the worst possible scenario. You don't plan to go into a gunfight assuming your gun will transform into a knife. That's just silly. Finally, the elephant in the center ring, Amber and Sapphire. These 2 inks have methods of accelerating your ink production or cheating out bigger glimmers and making it so you can play higher cost cards earlier in a game. Accounting for these is a bit tricky, as you simply won't draw these pieces every game. My advice is to, for every playset of these cards in your deck, lower the curve by 0.5 for every piece. For example, if you included all the ramp options available in an Amber Sapphire deck, Lantern, One Jump Ahead, Mickey Mouse Detective, at the time of recording, then you could lower your mana curve by 1.5, making Scar an approximately 4.5 cost card. Okay, Miss Circus Lady, that doesn't make any sense. How can you have half an ink? That's not possible. Well, you're not wrong. However, this is in order to account for variance. In some games, you'll be able to cast Scar for 3 because you got all of your ramp pieces on time and you're popping off. Sometimes he'll be 4 or 5, just because sometimes you only draw 1 or 2 ramp pieces on time. And sometimes you won't draw any, meaning he costs 6. So we settle on 0.5. Now, if and when we get more ramp options, I would consider adjusting that number. Maybe it only goes down 0.5 for a few set numbers of playsets with each additional playset, or maybe if a card enables you to ink twice, for example, maybe we can talk about it then. We're still in the early stages of cards getting revealed, so the possibilities are still endless. Keep in mind, these observations are based on the current cards we have in the game, and things can change depending on new cards released or new mechanics. The main takeaway you should leave with tonight is to carefully consider the composition of the ink costs in your deck. As a bit of a TLDR, if you want to play an aggressive deck, you can play more smaller cost glimmers with little card draw because your goal is to overrun your opponent as soon as possible and not ink too many cards. As a side note, this does not mean don't run card draw. It definitely looks like in this game you're going to want to have at least some form of card draw in every deck. Whether that be a glimmer coming into play and drawing you a card, or a card that draws you cards at little cost in your ink so that you can draw a card and then play something. If you're playing a mid-range deck, you'll want some ramp options and card draw if your colors can support it. And if you're playing a heavy late-game deck, wanting to cast big dragons or powerful questers like Maleficent Monstrous Dragon or Mickey Brave Little Tailor, make sure to pack as many accelerators as possible and a good amount of card draw, as you'll be wanting to be inking a card every single turn. So, that'll wrap up my coverage of Ink Curve in Lorcana. Keep in mind that this is coming from mostly me doing the math on the side, and it could change once we learn more about the game, get more data, and play more games. Data is extremely important in trading card games, and we have incomplete data sets at the moment, so this advice may vary. It'll probably change once organized play comes out, we get the full set, and people start playing this game all across the country. However, what do you think? Am I completely wrong? Do you think that there's a different way to interpret mana curve? Or maybe this is a new resource system that hasn't been seen before, so we should take different math into account? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, while you're down there, go ahead and drop me a like and give me a subscribe. I hear that helps the algorithm a lot, and I really don't want to make that thing angry. Once again, thank you all so very much for watching, and until next time, au revoir!